When God pulled you out of the narcissist's life, he didn't just rescue you. He signed the death warrant for the empire they built on lies, manipulation, and stolen joy. You may not have realized it at the time. You may have thought you were simply walking away for your own survival. But in heaven's courtroom, the judge of all creation was issuing a decree. No more. My child will no longer be used, drained, or dishonored. That moment marked the beginning of their terrifying decline. For years, the narcissists thrived because they had you as their supply, your compassion, your loyalty, your hard work, your prayers, your God-given light. They didn't appreciate it. They exploited it. And while you were in their presence, they believed nothing could touch them. They were wrong. When God separates you from someone like that, He's not just removing you for your safety. He's dismantling their entire false kingdom. He strips away their shields, exposes their weakness, and hands them over to the very consequences they once thought they'd never face. And here's what you need to understand. This is not random. This is not bad luck for them. This is the divine justice of God in action. Scripture says in Galatians 6-7, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap." They sowed betrayal. They sowed cruelty. They sowed deception. And now, without you there, they are going to reap, and it will be terrifying. In this message, I'm going to walk you through the 7 chilling things that begin to happen in the life of a narcissist once God separates you from them. Some of these you may have already suspected. Others will shock you. But all of them will reveal just how powerful God's hand is when He says, "Enough." 1. Left alone in God, allowed isolation. When God separates His children from danger, He does not make mistakes. He does not pull you away prematurely, nor does He leave you there 1 second longer than necessary. And when He pulled you away from the narcissist, it was not simply an act of mercy toward you. It was the opening move in a far greater plan of divine justice. To the outside world, it might have looked like a simple breakup, a family falling out, or the natural drift of relationships over time. But in the unseen realm, the Almighty, the one who knows the end from the beginning, had issued a decree. And that decree was not just about your rescue, it was also about their reckoning. For years, the narcissist had built their life like a parasite attached to a living host. You were that host. Your love became their energy. Your prayers became their shield. Your forgiveness became their safety net. And all the while, they mistook God's patience for permission. They confused your endurance with their invincibility. They told themselves they were untouchable, that no matter how much they manipulated, deceived, or harmed, you would always come back. And to be honest, there were times you believed that too. But God was watching. He saw the tears you cried in secret, the nights you couldn't sleep, the silent prayers you prayed asking Him to step in. And when the fullness of time had come, He did. It didn't happen in the way you might have expected. God's separations are often quiet, almost surgical. He removed you in a way that not only protected you but also began the slow collapse of the narcissist's false kingdom. And make no mistake, when God closes a door, no one can open it. Revelation 3-7. At first, the narcissist didn't panic. They assumed this was just another one of those temporary rifts you'd had before, the kind they could fix with a few words, some fake charm, or a carefully crafted apology that sounded sincere but meant nothing. But this time, it didn't work. Your heart no longer responded to their hooks. Your spirit no longer bent under their pressure. Why? Because the hand of God was holding you steady. They tried other ways. They reached out through mutual friends. They tested the waters with accidental run-ins. They sent messages dripping with nostalgia, reminding you of the good times, while conveniently ignoring the pain they caused. But it all hit a wall, the invisible, immovable wall of God's will. As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, something began to happen that they had never experienced before. Their audience started shrinking. The people who once listened to their endless complaints about you began to lose interest. Friends who used to take their side now made excuses not to get involved. Even family members who once believed their stories began to notice inconsistencies. Without you there to absorb their anger, smooth over their conflicts, and keep their image intact, the cracks in their facade became visible to everyone. And here is where the true weight of divine isolation begins. People don't just drift away from them, they actively avoid them. It starts small. A neighbor waves from a distance instead of stopping to talk. A co-worker avoids sharing the same lunch break. A sibling cancels plans at the last minute. But over time, the pattern becomes undeniable. The narcissist is being left alone, not in peaceful solitude, but in an echo chamber of their own making. And here is the difference between human isolation and God-allowed isolation. Human isolation can be broken by effort, by mending relationships, by making amends. But God-allowed isolation is unbreakable until the lesson is learned, and the narcissist rarely learns. Instead of repentance, they double down on pride. Instead of humility, they lash out with more arrogance. And each outburst pushes people further away. I have seen it with my own eyes. The way medical staff dread entering the room of an elderly narcissist. The way adult children shorten their visits from hours to minutes. The way even the most patient friends begin to pray, "Lord, please, just give them peace, in your way." And often, peace comes in the form of finality. They notice it too. They can feel the absence. In the quiet of their home, they remember the sound of your voice. In the moments when illness weakens them, they remember the meals you cooked, the errands you ran, the prayers you whispered over them, and somewhere deep in the darkness of their soul, they know the truth. God took you away. That thought becomes a torment. Because if God took you away, it means they were the problem. It means they were not the victim they always pretended to be. They were the oppressor. And now, without you there to deflect the consequences, those consequences come knocking louder every day. Proverbs 1:26-27 describes this chilling reality. I, in turn, will laugh when disaster strikes you. I will mock when calamity overtakes you. When calamity overtakes you like a storm. When disaster sweeps over you like a whirlwind. When distress and trouble overwhelm you. This is the storm's beginning. Isolation is the first wave. And God, in His perfect justice, allows them to sit in it, not for cruelty's sake, but to strip away every excuse, every mask, every false story they've told themselves and others, until all that remains is the truth they've spent their whole life running from. Without control over someone else, they have no life at all. 2. Hatred and bitterness exposed. When God separates you from the narcissist, something begins to happen almost immediately, something they can no longer hide, no matter how hard they try. The hatred and bitterness that once simmered just beneath the surface now boil over for everyone to see. For years, they were skilled at keeping up appearances. They knew when to flash a smile, when to use a gentle tone, when to charm their way into someone's favor. They could save their venom for private moments, unleashing it behind closed doors while presenting an entirely different face in public. But here is the truth. When God removes the one person who managed their image, the one who smoothed over their rough edges, explained away their outbursts, and softened the damage they caused, their mask begins to crack. And once the cracks appear, the poison inside starts to leak out. It doesn't take long for people to notice. A store clerk sees the way they snap over something trivial. A neighbor hears the shouting through the walls. A family member experiences a sudden, unprovoked attack over something petty. The narcissist no longer has the patience to pretend. They've lost the one who used to cover them, and without that cover, their true nature stands exposed. And this nature is not softened by age. For most people, growing older brings a certain gentleness. Life's struggles humble them, and wisdom teaches them the value of peace. But for the narcissist, the opposite is true. Age strips away their self-control. Weakness feeds their resentment. The reality of their decline, physically, socially, even financially, becomes something they can't accept. Instead of humility, they choose hostility. Instead of reflection, they choose rage. They begin to see their aging body, their fading influence, as a cosmic injustice. And because they can't strike out at God directly, they strike out at everyone else. I've seen fathers grow jealous of their own sons, not because of rivalry over possessions, but simply because the son's body is strong while theirs is failing. I've seen mothers resent their daughters for being beautiful in the way they no longer are. I've seen friends secretly rejoice when someone else's life falls apart, because it temporarily makes them feel better about their own. This is the sickness of the narcissistic heart. They cannot rejoice with those who rejoice. Romans 12:15. Instead, they resent them. And when you were in their life, you were often the target of that resentment. They might have masked it with fake flattery or backhanded compliments, but it was there, eating away at the relationship from the inside. Now, after God has separated you, their bitterness has no outlet in you, so it spills onto everyone else. The circle of people they alienate grows wider and wider. What once could be passed off as a bad day or a moment of stress becomes a pattern everyone recognizes. This person is hateful, and they're not even trying to hide it anymore. And here's the spiritual reality. This exposure is part of God's judgment. Ecclesiastes 12:14 tells us, "For God will bring every deed into judgment, with every secret thing, whether good or evil." The narcissist built their life on secrets, secret grudges, secret envies, secret hatreds. Now, those secrets are dragged into the light, and they cannot control the narrative anymore. Their outbursts get quicker, their grudges get pettier. They snap at small inconveniences, erupt over imagined slights, and create conflicts out of thin air. They poison family gatherings. They ruin peaceful moments. And in doing so, they drive away the very people who might have otherwise been willing to care for them in their later years. There is a proverb, not from the Bible, but true nonetheless, that says, "Bitterness is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die." That is exactly what happens here. Their hatred doesn't destroy you. You're free now. Instead, it destroys them from the inside out. Their face hardens, their health declines. Their mind becomes consumed with old grudges they replay like a broken record. And God, in His justice, allows this to happen. Not because He delights in their suffering, but because He will not allow unrepentant evil to remain hidden forever. The narcissist spent years hiding their bitterness behind charm. Now, after God has separated you, there is no charm left, only the raw, unfiltered truth of who they really are. And that truth is ugly, it is corrosive, and it is the beginning of their downfall. 3. Extreme paranoia, the prison of their own mind. When God separated you from the narcissist, He didn't just remove their ability to drain your life, He also removed the one person who used to filter, explain away, and manage their mental chaos. And without that steadying presence, the chaos inside them begins to turn on itself. Paranoia is not new to the narcissist, even in their younger, more polished years. It lived in the shadows of their mind. They constantly questioned people's motives, suspected betrayal, and read hostility into the smallest gestures. But when you were in their life, you often played the role of the interpreter, calming their fears, redirecting their suspicions, and reassuring them when their minds spiraled. Now, with you gone, there is no buffer. The walls they built to keep others under control now feel like the walls of a prison closing in on them, and the enemy they fear most is no longer out there. It is in their own head. It starts small. A passing comment from a neighbor becomes a coded insult. A delayed phone call from a relative becomes evidence of a plot. A glance from a stranger at the grocery store becomes a judgment on their worth. They begin to see enemies everywhere. Soon, the paranoia grows bolder. They accuse the very few people who still check in on them of stealing, plotting, or wishing them harm. A caretaker becomes a spy. A sibling becomes greedy for the inheritance. The government becomes out to get them. The entire neighborhood becomes a network talking about them behind their back. It would almost be pitiable if it weren't so toxic, because their paranoia is not passive, it's aggressive. They confront people with wild accusations. They slam doors, make angry phone calls, write venomous messages. They wage wars over events that never happened and injuries that exist only in their imagination. And here's the spiritual reality. Paranoia is the harvest of the seeds they've sown. Galatians 6-7 says, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. A man reaps what he sows." For years, the narcissists sowed suspicion, division, and betrayal into the lives of others. They whispered lies. They created rifts between people. They accused the innocent. Now, God allows them to live in the very environment they once created for others, a world where no one can be trusted and danger feels like it's lurking around every corner. This kind of mental torment is its own form of judgment. Romans 1:28 speaks of God giving people over to a depraved mind when they persist in rejecting Him. That's what you're seeing here. Their refusal to walk in truth has left them unable to even recognize truth. And when you can't tell what's real, you live in a constant state of fear. But here's the twist. Their paranoia also accelerates their isolation. Even the most loyal people eventually get tired of being falsely accused. The friend who used to stop by every week starts coming once a month, then once every few months, then not at all. The relative who used to answer every call starts letting them go to voicemail. The nurse who used to linger a little longer in their room now keeps visits as short as possible. By the time this paranoia reaches its peak, the narcissist has become a self-fulfilling prophecy. They claimed everyone would abandon them, and now everyone has. They claimed people were talking about them, and now people are, though not in the way they imagined. They claimed no one could be trusted, and now no one trusts them. And in the quiet moments, when the television is off and the house is still, their mind becomes the loudest enemy they've ever faced. Every shadow feels like a threat. Every memory feels like a betrayal. Every silence feels like proof that the world has turned against them. It's in those moments that God's separation feels most like judgment, because without you, without someone to stabilize them, they are left alone in the prison of their own making, serving a life sentence in the solitary confinement of their mind. 4. Losing all patience and control. The child inside the aging body. One of the most devastating transformations that happens to a narcissist after God separates you from them is the complete collapse of their self-control. For years, they carried themselves with a carefully constructed facade, smiling in public, shaking hands with fake warmth, and pretending to be patient when it served their agenda. But here's the truth. That patience was never genuine. It was a performance. It was the mask they wore to keep their access to people, resources, and power. Once God removes you, the one who helped them keep up the act, the mask falls off, and what emerges is not the dignified elder they want the world to see, but the developmentally stunted child they've always been on the inside. The shift can be startling. You'll hear about them cutting in line at the grocery store, arguing with a cashier over pennies, or cursing out a stranger in traffic. They no longer have the restraint to play the game. Why? Because narcissistic self-control is not born from maturity, it's born from calculation. And as they age, their ability to calculate diminishes. They are used to getting what they want instantly. In their youth, their charm or intimidation could speed things up. But with age, those tools dull. People are no longer impressed by their stories, no longer afraid of their temper, and when their demands aren't met right away, they erupt. I've seen it happen in waiting rooms. A receptionist asks them to fill out a form, and instead of complying, they slam the pen down and demand to speak to someone in charge. I've seen it in restaurants, where a slightly delayed order sends them into a public tirade, embarrassing everyone at the table. I've seen it at family gatherings, where a casual comment triggers a shouting match because they took it as an insult. This is more than just bad manners. This is the fruit of a life without the Spirit's transforming work. Galatians 5:22-23 lists patience and self-control as the fruit of the Holy Spirit. Without the Spirit, there is nothing to restrain the selfish, impulsive nature of the flesh, and the older they get, the less strength they have to keep it hidden. It's important to understand the spiritual dimension of this. When God separates you from the narcissist, He's also removing one of the last stabilizing influences in their life. You might have been the one to whisper, calm down, to make excuses for them, or to quietly clean up the mess they caused. Without you, there is no one left to smooth things over. So every ugly outburst stays on full display, burning bridges they can never rebuild. And these outbursts have consequences. They lose friends who can't stand the constant drama. They lose service providers who politely decline to work with them again. They lose opportunities because no one wants to take the risk. Even those who once tolerated them begin to say, it's just not worth it. The saddest part, they don't see their role in any of it. In their mind, they are the victim of disrespect, incompetence, or conspiracy. They never connect the dots between their behavior and their isolation. Instead, every consequence becomes another excuse to lash out even more, feeding a vicious cycle of anger and loss. And God allows this cycle to continue. Romans 2-5 warns, "But because of your stubbornness and your unrepentant heart, you are storing up wrath against yourself for the day of God's wrath." Each tantrum, each burned bridge, each public spectacle is part of the storehouse of consequences they are building with their own hands. By the time this stage is in full swing, the narcissist is no longer the powerful figure they once imagined themselves to be. They are the aging, angry child in an adult body, red-faced, shouting, pounding their fist because the world no longer bends to their will. And with every outburst, they push themselves further into the corner God has allowed them to stand in, alone. 5. Obsessed with youth to escape reality, a desperate, parasitic fantasy. When God separated you from the narcissist, He cut off a lifeline they depended on far more than they were willing to admit. Your presence gave them something money couldn't buy: emotional stability, a sense of relevance, and access to the life-giving energy that comes from being truly known and truly cared for. Without you, that energy source is gone, and instead of turning to God in repentance, instead of seeking healing for the deep cracks in their soul, they go looking for a replacement. And in one of the most pathetic and disturbing twists of the narcissistic mind, that replacement often comes in the form of youth. For older narcissists, especially men, this obsession with youth can become an all-consuming pursuit. They convince themselves that if they can be around someone younger, someone radiant, vibrant, full of life, they can somehow absorb that youth for themselves. It's almost vampiric in nature. They want to feed off the vitality of another human being to mask their own decay. They target young partners not out of love, but out of desperation. Love requires selflessness, sacrifice, and mutual respect, qualities the narcissist has no interest in developing. What they want is a living trophy, someone who can stand beside them in public and silently proclaim, "I'm still desirable, I'm still powerful, I'm still relevant." But here's the truth they refuse to face. Youth cannot be borrowed. It cannot be absorbed. It cannot be worn like a garment to hide the aging of the soul. Ecclesiastes 11:10 says, "So then, banish anxiety from your heart and cast off the troubles of your body, for youth and vigor are meaningless." The narcissist rejects this wisdom. They cling to youth as if it is the one thing that can save them from the truth of time and from the reality of God's judgment. Their obsession is costly. They will pour out thousands, even millions, to buy affection from someone younger. Lavish gifts, expensive trips, luxury cars, all offered in exchange for the illusion that they are still young and in control. In some cases, they will marry this young supply despite the glaring age gap, convincing themselves that it is proof of their desirability rather than a sign of their desperation. But God, in His justice, often turns this obsession into a source of humiliation. The young partner they've secured eventually begins to see the truth, the controlling behavior, the unreasonable demands, the bitterness that seeps into every conversation. And slowly, that youthful presence, the very thing they thought would save them, begins to pull away. The narcissist notices it in subtle ways at first. less enthusiasm in their voice, less willingness to indulge their temper, more time spent apart. And then one day, the partner leaves altogether, taking with them not just the illusion of youth, but a portion of the narcissist's dignity. When that happens, the crash is brutal. They are forced to look into the mirror and see not the vibrant, powerful image they've tried to project, but the aging, lonely figure God has allowed them to become. The lines on their face seem deeper, the energy in their body feels weaker, and the hollow emptiness inside is louder than ever. Here's the divine irony. In chasing youth to escape the reality of their decline, they actually accelerate it. The stress of maintaining the illusion, the financial drain, the emotional games, the constant fear of being replaced, eats away at them. Proverbs 13:7 says, "One person pretends to be rich, yet has nothing. Another pretends to be poor, yet has great wealth." The narcissist lives in that first half, pretending to be rich in life, while growing bankrupt in soul. And make no mistake, this is not just sad, it is judgment. God allows them to be consumed by the very idol they chose over him. In their mind, being with someone younger was supposed to make them feel immortal. Instead, it becomes a mirror that reflects exactly what they cannot escape. Their time is running out, and the years they wasted will not return. This is the curse of their obsession with youth. It doesn't slow down their decline, it highlights it. It doesn't heal their loneliness, it deepens it. And it doesn't replace what they lost when God separated you, because what they lost was never just a relationship. They lost the covering of your prayers, the stability of your presence, and the mercy of God holding back the full weight of their consequences. Now, they are left with nothing but the ticking clock, the fading reflection in the mirror, and the gnawing awareness that no amount of youth in their arms can stop the hand of God. 6. Losing their emotional and material supply. When the wells run dry. When God separated you from the narcissist, he didn't just remove a person from their life, he removed a supply chain. And for the narcissist, that supply chain wasn't just emotional, it was everything. You were more than a partner, a friend, or a family member. You were a provider in ways they will never fully admit. You gave them emotional regulation when their own minds spun out of control. You gave them validation when their ego deflated. You gave them practical help when they were in over their head. You gave them financial and material support, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. And they never said thank you. Why would they? In their mind, they were entitled to everything you gave. Your giving was not seen as generosity, it was seen as their right. But when God stepped in and separated you, that entitlement ran headfirst into a reality they had never faced. The well was dry. At first, they think they can replace you easily. They start looking for new supply, new people to manipulate, charm, or intimidate into filling the gap. But here's where God's justice is so profound. He begins to close the doors on them, one by one. Potential new partners see the warning signs early and back away. Friends they try to re-establish contact with keep their guard up. Even family members who once came running now stand at a distance. They try to adapt, but it's like drinking from a cup with a crack in it. Whatever they manage to get slips away before it can satisfy them. And the longer this goes on, the more desperate they become. Emotionally, they are starving. Without a steady source of admiration, attention, or compliance, they become irritable, restless, and angry. They pick fights for no reason, just to feel a flicker of emotional engagement. But instead of drawing people in, this behavior pushes them further away. Materially, the loss hits hard. Without someone to share the financial load, they begin to feel the weight of their own irresponsibility. Bills pile up, repairs go undone. The lifestyle they flaunted becomes harder to maintain. They may sell possessions, downsize, or take on debts they cannot repay. But each step down the ladder feels like a public shaming. The Bible warns us about this false sense of security. Jeremiah 17:5-6 says, "Cursed is the one who trusts in man, who draws strength from mere flesh. That person will be like a bush in the wastelands. They will not see prosperity when it comes. They will dwell in the parched places of the desert, in a salt land where no one lives. The narcissist built their trust in mere flesh, not in God, but in the people they could control. And when God removes those people, they are left in a spiritual and emotional desert. One of the most painful parts of this stage for the narcissist is that they know exactly what they've lost. They remember the stability of having someone who always picked up the phone, someone who bailed them out of trouble, someone who shielded them from consequences. And now, every time they need something, they are faced with the reality that person is gone, and God is not sending them back. This loss becomes more than inconvenience. It becomes identity-shattering. The narcissist's sense of self was built on their ability to control and extract from others. Without that, they don't know who they are. They become like a merchant whose only product has been pulled from the shelves, or a king whose army has deserted him. The throne remains, but it's surrounded by empty seats. And here's where God's justice is again so precise. He doesn't have to strike them with lightning or send a dramatic disaster. He simply lets the natural consequences of their own choices play out. Proverbs 11:29 says, "Whoever brings ruin on their family will inherit only wind, and the fool will be servant to the wise." They brought ruin, and now their inheritance is wind. By this point, the narcissist isn't just losing material supply, they are losing the will to fight for it. They are tired, worn down, and humiliated. They begin to realize, even if they'll never say it out loud, that the loss of you was the turning point. From the day God separated you, their decline began, and every step since has only confirmed it. They thought they could survive without you. They thought they could find another you, but the wells have run dry, and the desert stretches farther than they can see. 7. Physical decline as a sentence. When the body tells the truth. There is a moment in the downfall of every unrepentant narcissist when the consequences stop being invisible and start showing up in the mirror. For years, they have hidden behind charisma, money, or control, masking the reality that their body, like everyone else's, is subject to time. But when God separates you from them, He doesn't just take away the emotional and material support. He removes the buffer that kept them from feeling the full weight of their own decay. Without you there to carry the stress, they carry it themselves. And stress is a cruel master. Sleepless nights turn into hollow eyes. Constant anger turns into high blood pressure. Years of selfish indulgence turn into chronic illness. The very body they once used to project power and dominance becomes a living testimony of their decline. The change is often shocking. Hair that once shone with health thins and grays faster. Skin loses its tone and sags, not just from age, but from the corrosive effects of bitterness. Weight fluctuates wildly, some waste away, others bloat from poor diet and neglect. Muscles weaken, movements slow, and tasks that were once effortless now leave them winded. And here's the part they cannot bear. People notice. The same acquaintances who once envied their appearance now comment on how tired they look. The young supply they chased loses interest when the illusion of vitality fades. Even strangers treat them differently, no longer as someone commanding attention, but as someone fragile, even pitiful. This is more than biology. This is a spiritual principle at work. Proverbs 14:30 says, "A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones." The narcissist's heart has never been at peace. Envy, resentment, and pride have been their constant companions, and now those companions are showing on the outside. Their body is telling the truth their words have always denied. The irony is painful. They invested so much energy into controlling others, only to lose control over themselves. They built their identity on being untouchable, only to find themselves dependent on the very people they once disdained. And as the body weakens, so does their ability to hide the childlike helplessness beneath the facade. For some, the decline comes as a slow erosion, each year taking a little more stamina, a little more sharpness, a little more pride. For others, it arrives in the form of a sudden health crisis, a heart attack, a stroke, a diagnosis that strips them of independence overnight. And when it happens, they can't help but remember the one person who used to be there in moments like these, the one God removed. It's in the hospital bed, or the lonely bedroom, or the chair they can barely rise from, that the reality sets in. They are no longer feared, no longer envied, no longer in control. The empire they built has crumbled, and the body they live in has become a prison. Psalm 37:17 says, "For the power of the wicked will be broken, but the Lord upholds the righteous." Their power, physical, social, and emotional, is broken, and God allows them to feel every ounce of that loss, not out of cruelty, but as the inevitable result of a life spent resisting Him. By the time this stage is reached, there are no illusions left. The aging body has become the final judge and jury, delivering a sentence that cannot be appealed. Time has run out, and there is no going back. And perhaps the most haunting part of all is this: they know, deep in the pit of their soul, that it all began the moment God separated you from them. That was the turning point, and every step since has led them here, to the lonely, irreversible end that no charm, no manipulation, and no defiance can escape.